and I'm really excited to share with you a fireside chat with someone I deeply admire, who I believe is absolutely a social artist, and that is Chris Guillebeau. And he founded the World Domination Summit, which ran in Portland for many years. He has a new conference called NeuroDiversion. He's also a blogger, a podcaster, a best-selling author on entrepreneurship and side hustles. So I would love for you to stand up and give a warm welcome to Chris Guillebeau. Woo-hoo!
Thank you. I feel so special already. What a fun touch.
This is our fireside chat.
Oh, I love it. That's great. That's amazing.
Has anybody in the room been to a World Domination Summit besides me and Haley? Okay, well, you all missed out. Okay, it doesn't exist anymore, but Chris is on to new, bigger, and not necessarily better, but different things.
Different things.
Different things. Chris was high on my list when I thought about people that I wanted to have at this event in terms of someone I consider like a real conference innovator. And so I'm very grateful and honored to have you
Thank
here.
you. Can I just interrupt briefly and say I'm very happy to be here, and I'm so glad that you were doing this.
Yeah.
It is very lonely to organize conferences and events, as everybody here probably understands. And like, we never get the opportunity to talk with other people. Maybe we get to talk to like one other person, but not with all these people. So I thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. Very excited. First of many, hopefully. For people who don't know what World Domination Summit was, can you give us kind of the overview? I know you had 3 very pivotal core principles, like who would come and who would present.
Sure. Or maybe it's best to like, how did it come to be?
Great.
And then to get into that. So, I didn't grow up wanting to be an event planner. I don't know that anybody ever has that aspiration. We just kind of like fall into it, right? But I had done a few different things. I was an aid worker in West Africa for a number of years. And then I started this blog called The Art of Nonconformity, where I was going to every country in the world and writing about it. And I was hosting meetups in different places. And like, all these cool people were coming out, and like, they all had interesting stories. And I was like, well, it'd be really fun to bring together people, not just from one city, but from like everywhere. And I had my first book out, and I went to all 50 states on like a little unconventional book tour. And so I was like, guys, come to Portland, Oregon. That's where I was living at the time, and we're gonna do something. And I really had no idea like how to run an event. And so there was this very like beginner's mind to it, which is interesting because you end up making a lot of mistakes, which we can talk about, but you also get some things right. And so I remember going to the Portland Art Museum to like rent it out for the first time. And like, we met with their team, and they're asking these questions, and not only do I not know the answers to the questions about, various event things, I don't even know what they're referring to. Like, I don't know the language, the terminology. But we figured it out, right? And we brought, I think, 400 people the first year, and then grew it, after that. So for 10 years, World Domination Summit was a gathering designed to answer the question, how do we live a remarkable life in a conventional world? And so that's meant to be deliberately broad, and people could answer that question however they chose to, right? So we had a lot of different speakers. Over the years, we had people like Brene Brown and Susan Cain, Gretchen Rubin, Chase Jarvis, lots of other author friends of mine. And then we also did breakouts. We did not do panels. I do not like panels, just like you. But then we also tried to cultivate a sense of community, adventure, and service, were those values that you mentioned. So we tried to have lots of fun things as part of it.
Yeah, I remember like the marching band. I went in 2015 with my husband. There was like so much fun and so much joy and expression and community participation. So I would love for you to share with folks, like, what were some of the experiments you made that went well, the things that you tried that were like, wow, this is awesome, let's do this every year? Because you had some really cool traditions that my hope is that you're going to take away some really great ideas from what
That's funny.
tried and be able to iterate on them.
No, thank you. It's funny you mentioned the marching bands. I remember 2 things about that. I remember one thing that did not go well. I always like to just try stuff, as you said. And one time I was like, we had a theater of like 1,000 people, so there's like 3 tiers, and I was like, we should have a parade to exit the theater to like go out to break, and that'll be really fun. Like, after the last keynote speaker for the morning, I'm gonna like bring in a trumpet player and some other people, dancers, and we'll all like go off in this jubilant parade. And so what I didn't realize, even though I should have at that point, is it takes a long time to exit a theater, like with 1,000 people. So the first 2 minutes of the parade was very like jubilant and boisterous, and then you have like 7 minutes where everybody's just exiting the theater. So that one didn't work so well. But what I also think of is I think it was like year 4 or 5. All of you conference planners understand like there are compromises you have to make in terms of working in theaters and with unions and with catering and such. You have to pay like $12 for a cup of coffee for your attendees and such. So one time we had this kind of a little dispute with the venue we were working with, which they were great otherwise. But one time I had sent everybody out for their break and I was like, hey, everybody, there's a yogurt parfait out for you. And something happened and like the catering did not provide what they agreed to provide. So, I had to apologize to people. I'm like, I feel really bad about this. But then later in the like discussion with the venue, they didn't agree to take responsibility for it. And it kind of pissed me off a little bit. So the next year I was like, what can we do about this? And I would love to just give everybody snacks myself, but I can't do that, right? Because of the whole exclusivity and the contracts and things. And we can't even do that in the lobby or even in the street outside, right? Because they have that permitted. But there's no rule about like 2 blocks away, So what we did was like we had a team member who like planned this out and got pickup trucks full of snacks and hired drag queens on stilts and Chinese fire breathers and all kinds of performance artists, and we put on like the whole production. And I stood out when I sent everybody out for break. I was like, guys, here's what happened last year. I promised you a yogurt parfait and you didn't get it, and I was really mad about that. So we're going to do our own thing basically. And so I sent everybody away. So the fun thing about it was it actually cost us a lot less money to do that, right? Because catering is expensive when you're going through these exclusive contracts. And people had a much better experience, right? They had this really cool thing like, oh, there's like drag queens and like fire breathers and break dancers and everything. And then it also became like part of a story or a narrative. And so I think what we tried to do, and when we got it right, it was like we're creating a shared story. We're like embracing challenge and adventure and being willing to try different things and like wacky things. And actually, for that catering experience, every year for the next 4 years, we just did it that way. Like this is like now part of our tradition. So we tried to have like the value of attendee experience being like, this is our guiding value as a team. When we think about what are we going to do, like how are we making these various programming decisions and there's conflict and like we can't do this, can't do everything, what is best for attendee experience? So we did not get everything right and made a lot of mistakes, but I think that's what we tried to do. That was the goal.
Can you tell folks about the world records?
Yeah, so we had a couple of world records. I don't know if we have any pictures. I think we have a couple of pictures here maybe somewhere. Let's see. That's just like one of our parties. But we got into this thing of doing every year, every other year, like trying to set a Guinness World Record. This is the last one that we did. We did a yoga one. We did one with everybody forming a human chain on the Willamette River. We did the world's biggest breakfast in bed party. And that was called Worldwide Waffles. Fun fact about that, we really liked the name Worldwide Waffles, and we had that like 6 months in advance. And coming down to the actual planning of the world record, we had all the logistics figured out, except we could not source waffles anywhere. And if we hadn't named it Worldwide Waffles, it would be like, not a problem, we'll just serve people something else, right? But we've named it that, so we have to solve that. So that became like the last minute sort of thing of solving it. But this was the last one we did, which was the world's largest gathering of people in T-Rex costumes. And that was just a lot of fun. It's fun, but it also kind of takes over your planning process. So if you want to do a world record, you have to be kind of prepared for a lot of work.
Yeah. How do you think about balancing, for those of you who maybe done like, when you have an annual event and you're running things year after year, there's certain things that you want to be consistent, right? That people know to lean into and they can count on, but then you also need to keep it fresh. Interesting.
Sure.
How do you think about like balancing consistency?
Yeah. Well, you have like a core experience. You have a core experience that you build, and then you think, what is different for this year? Maybe here's something. I think it's good to have an internal theme, like a secret theme. So you might have like a stated theme, like that everybody knows about, right? But I think as your planning team, you have something that you just don't ever tell people. You just do it. So for example, one year our theme was layers of kindness. And we're like, we're going to build this, we're going to infuse this into the event. And we have, so that year, I think we had 1,000 people. So, okay, for our registration app, which is just like an internal app, when people register, we check their name off, we built in a separate little checklist for each person's name. And 6 months or so ahead of the event, we're sending out surveys and asking people a bunch of questions. And there's some of them are like decoy questions. What we really want to know is what seems like dumb information, like what is your favorite candy bar and what's your favorite, musical artist and things like that. So we're getting this personalized information. So our goal was over the course of a weekend, and we have volunteers assigned to this, Like we want to try to do something personalized and kind and special for each person. And we're checking this off internally. And so the key point when you do that is you never tell people this. You never like stand up at the end of the event, hey guys, just so you know, our theme was kindness. I hope you all felt like, kinded as a verb. It's just something that you do. And I think if you make people feel special, I think that is what makes a conference great. Is making people feel special. It covers up any other mistakes or anything else, or like you're always going to be growing and learning and things could always be better, but like, are you trying to make people special? And that's what I think is worth it. That's why we do this, because it's hard to do it, right? It is hard to, like, there is a great deal of emotional labor that is involved in putting on well-run conferences and events, as you know, right?
Yes. Sure.
And like there's highs and lows and these peaks and like emotions are very heightened, so attendees have great experiences and terrible experiences. And like you have to think about like, what is the goal? And I think the goal is to make people feel special.
And that's like at its scale, at 1,000 people, to make 1,000 people feel special at a conference, right? It's like a big lift.
You have to think about it. You have to put intention into it. But why are you doing what you do, right? There are easier things to do, I think, than put on an event, right?
Agreed.
There are much easier things to do. So, your competitive advantage is you're doing something that a lot of other people don't want to do. Or if they want to do it, they think they want to. It's kind of like writing a book. A lot of people think they want to write a book, and then they get in the process of like, oh, maybe I want to write one book. So putting on an event, I know a lot of people who've put on one event, right? And then they're like, oh, this is harder than I thought, So for everybody here who's like committed to this, like your competitive advantage is like you're doing something that is really hard, but ultimately worth it, I believe.
Yeah. Is there anything else from WDS that you want to share with us that was like a huge success or a surprise or a big fail that you're like, ooh,
Okay.
peaks or valleys?
Yeah, what did I say here? So I talked about attendee experience and the internal theme. I think there's a lot to be gained by going the extra mile. There's a lot to be gained by just continuing to think about how can we make this better each point of the process. So I think you and I were talking about neurodivergence earlier, maybe we'll come to that, but sometimes people ask about like, how do you make your events like neurodivergent friendly? And I think it starts by like 50% of it is making an intentional experience for everyone. And if you think about, it's not just people who have special needs, like everyone has special needs of some kind. And you don't have to be neurodivergent to feel nervous or awkward about coming to an event with lots of strangers and I'm going to be trapped in this situation. I don't have control. Like a lot of people feel kind of weird about that. And so how can you think about all of the touch points of like, what is it like, when people go through registration? You guys did a great job at that this morning. What is it like? What's the first thing people hear? What's the first thing they see? Like, just thinking through it from the perspective of an attendee, I think is really helpful. In terms of what else went wrong, well, we were talking about world records. There were some years we didn't do one, and sometimes it was just because we're like, this is taking over our planning process. We want to actually put on the rest of the event. But one time it was like, okay, we're going to bring it back, and our great idea is like the world's biggest trust fall exercise. Does everybody know what a trust fall is, right? I don't know why we thought this was a great idea, but we actually announced it and everything. And then finally, at some point, our team starts like trying to rehearse this and like block it out. And there's like 8 of us, and it didn't work with 8 people. And like it was like a lot of things could go wrong here. And even if it goes well, it's not that exciting. It's not that spectacular, compared to something like this or whatever. So like we had to backtrack on that and say, sorry about that, it didn't work out so well. Yeah. There's probably many more things I could say that didn't go well. Yeah.
But it's also good to know when to call it, right? And be like, oops, sorry, like not feasible.
Yeah, the mistake would have been to like try to do it. Yeah,
through.
right.
Yeah, totally.
For sure.
So you sunset WDS in 2022, and now in 2025, Chris launched a new conference. So he's back for more, called NeuroDiversion. So maybe could you tell us a little bit about what's the inspiration behind this new event?
So we sunset it. We did it for 10 years and just felt like it was like the logical conclusion. And I do love running events, even though they're very stressful. It's like love-hate relationship. I'm sure many of you can relate. And so I was like, I want to do something new, but I need to have a pretty clear reason for it. And I'd been learning a lot about my own neurodivergence. I'm ADHD, and have written about that and shared about it a good bit, and started learning more about connecting with other people in the community. And I realized that there actually is not an event, there is no gathering at all designed to celebrate people who experience neurodivergence, whether ADHD or autism or another type of neurodiversity. There are lots of clinical gatherings, there are academic gatherings, they're usually in hotel ballrooms. It's that very, very traditional format. And so the people who are actually experiencing these things, there's no community for them, and that's what we all want, is community and connection. So we started it as a pilot project earlier this year in Austin in March. We had about 350 people, and going back next year, also in Austin in March, neurodiversion.org. I'm really hoping to grow that, so that's my next thing.
Yeah, it's exciting. And is there anything from WDS that you're either like that you learned that you're replicating that you want to carry over, or things that you're like, I want to do this?
So a lot of the focus on community and connection is like, that's what we want to do. We want more of that. We want to think about all those touch points, maybe even more intentionally for this audience. Something we're doing less of is less keynote speaking. Our keynotes are much shorter. Our keynotes are 20 minutes, and I feel like that's even a little bit long. But keynote speakers don't like to when I pitched the keynote speakers this year, I was like, you guys have 20 minutes. Like, I got a lot of pushback on it because they're used to 45 or an hour or something. But I think we'll just set it, and it'll be like, this is what we do. So less keynotes, much more like interactive breakouts, meetups. So kind of flipping that a little bit, but a lot is the same. There was one thing I was going to show. This is a little a tip and trick. So this is cool. Here's something that you can all steal this.
Yeah.
I don't know correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know of any other event that has done this. Using silent disco headphones specifically for concurrent breakouts that are happening in the same space. And so this was our idea out of necessity, because we were in this really big warehouse and it was a great space overall. The challenge was like, how do we subdivide, when we send people away to breakouts, it's like 100 people in each breakout. So we do some pipe and drape, but it doesn't actually solve the whole sound issue. And then what if we just keep raising the volume of each one? That's not going to be good. So somebody had this idea, and I was like, I like it, but I'm scared, because what could go wrong? A lot of things could go wrong. But basically, there are 3 channels to these headphones. They're color coded, so it's like red, blue, green, and so every section has their color, and you can hear perfectly with it. You could be seated anywhere in the room, even like away from your section, and if you change to that channel, you can hear just as well as if you're like in the front row. And it worked so well. I thought we'd get resistance to it. I thought people wouldn't like it. I thought there would be some technical failure, and it was actually like 95% adoption. So I recommend that to anybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think we even talked about this on our pre-call, but I own 50 silent disco headsets.
Do you? Wow. Next time I'm going to call you.
I have extra equipment for you.
Great.
But I love the silent disco format, and I do an event
you do this.
Nature Disco.
Okay.
And I take people out into nature and we dance.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know the disco. I just hadn't seen.
Some of you have been there.
Yeah, I just hadn't seen it done for like breakouts or conferences.
No, I love this idea.
But that's great. So you actually own 50 heads. Okay, that's great.
They're at my house.
I was going to say they're not that expensive to rent. You rent them from a company, and it was like $500 for the weekend for like $300. It was a good deal.
Awesome. So last official question for you.
Okay.
If every organizer here walked away with one core idea to transform the way they design events, experiences, conferences, what do you think would be a useful thing for them to walk away with?
Okay. Great question. So I used that phrase attendee experience earlier. With the from to model that you have, which I love so much, I could think of the two very easy. The to is like attendees first, and the from is like everybody else first, like the organizing team, the sponsors, the partners, the speakers. Obviously, it takes a village. We're all important, but who's most important? And like in education, there's this model of student first. So I think in conference, it's like attendee first. And so if you think with an attendee experience mindset, that also is not quite the same as like letting everybody do what they want all the time, or just asking people, what do you want, and giving it to them because they don't always know what they want. Mm-hmm. So just for example, like when we were starting the first event, when we didn't know anything, I think for like the first 2 years in the program, we just had like Mainstage session 1 listed and Mainstage session 2, like no speakers, because the print deadline to print the program is like 10 days before the event, which means you have 9.5 days still to figure out who's speaking when. But then it's interesting, like after we got a little bit more organized, I was like, let's keep that, actually. And if you ask people, everybody would be like, I want to know exactly when all the speakers are speaking, right? But it's because they want to go to their favorite speakers, right? Or their popular people, or the people who have the most followers or whatever. And meanwhile, we're trying to bring on some lesser known voices and such, and we also have surprises built into each session. So we actually didn't list ever in WDS, like who's speaking when. It was just main stage session, main stage session. So you don't have to do it exactly that way, but the whole point is thinking about attendee experience, not just what people say, but what do they really need, and giving that to them.
Great, thank you so much. I realized all of you didn't get preview of content until last night, so.
It was strategic.
Thing. Yeah, exactly. It was somewhat strategic and somewhat accidental. So I know there was a comment here about truth or dare at a fireside chat. And so maybe you were reading our minds, or maybe you saw my social media posts, but we're going to end our fireside chat with a truth or dare.
Okay.
So could I have all of you give like a drum roll on your legs, just like a drum roll for Chris?
Who decides if it's truth or dare? Okay. Can I ask my small group? Can I ask MCK and Brooke and Georgia? Would you decide if it's truth or dare?
What did they do? Can you add?
Can we dare? I'm hearing dare. I'm hearing dare. You know,
Okay, dare.
Jenny's got a program here, so let's see. Spell out the alphabet letter by letter, while the audience calls out each letter as you go.
With your body.
With your body. Can you give an example of this? I'm not sure how to do that actually.
A.
Can you do it with me?
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Since you created this.
Okay. You guys have to call out the alphabet for us. Okay. Ready?
All right.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Thank you for the invitation to do it with you.